Backseas Musical Podcast.
For some of you, you might remember that it was Ellen Foley who was the female vocalist on the 1977 epic Paradise by the Dashboard Light by Meatloaf. It was released on the album Bat Outta Hell, which would go on to sell more than 50 million copies around the world. And if that's the only thing you knew about Ellen Foley, that's still a pretty good story. But what you might not remember about Ellen Foley is that she was also an actress who not only starred in the hit TV show Night Court, she was also in some of the biggest movies of the 80s and 90s, like Fatal Attraction, King of Comedy, Married to the Mob, Cocktail, and Tootsie. She also starred on Broadway, and if you stop there, that would still make for a pretty interesting interview as well. Except Ellen Foley also sang with Blue Oyster Cult, Joe Jackson, Ian Hunter of Mott the Hoople, and a band known as The Clash. In fact, she recorded stuff with The Clash a number of times. In fact, she was not only the one-time girlfriend of Mick Jones, it's said that she was the inspiration for the 1982 Clash hit, Should I Stay or Should I Go? And on her 1981 album Spirit of St. Louis, all four members of The Clash served as her backup band. She's recorded 5 solo records over the years, including her latest release, Fighting Words. And like so many other things in her life, the new album is the real deal. This is my conversation with the insanely talented Ellen Foley on Backseas Musical Podcast. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can. How are you?
Very, very good. Thank you very much for doing this. I appreciate it.
Sure.
Congratulations on the new record. I had a chance to listen to it over the last couple of days. I really, really like it. So that's
great. Thank you.
And I do want to ask you about that in a little bit, but I have to kind of get something off my chest here. 1977.
I'm in trouble.
No, you might be. 1977, 78. I was in junior high school. And we had...
okay. Don't rub it in.
I know. Well, we had school dances every Friday night. And it was in the cafeteria. And every dance required 3 songs. These were required songs. They were Stairway to Heaven. There was Freebird, because, those 2 songs alone are almost a full half hour slow dancing with girls. And then...
Did you live in the South?
No, I lived in New England.
Oh, okay, because Freebird,
I know, but any chance to play a 13-minute long slow song was all that really mattered. And then
I understand that. Yes.
And the third song was Paradise by the Dashboard Light by Meatloaf. I met my first girlfriend during that song. She broke up with me 2 weeks later after that song. Every time I hear it, I get this post-traumatic stress reaction from having my heart broken at the age of 13.
Course. And she said, I'm waiting for the end of time so I can end my time with you.
Yes.
Is that how she broke up with you?
It was almost like word for word. And
that's so sad. I'm sorry.
So indirectly, you helped sink that ship that night. So I don't know whether to thank you.
But do you look back on it and think it's good? I mean, are you married or have you recovered?
I have recovered pretty well. I am married. Everything worked out okay. But at the tender age of 13, it's just it didn't take much, but I'm not going to hold any hostility towards you if that's all
okay.
right.
Don't blame me.
I don't
blame Jim Steinman. He wrote the goddamn song. So don't blame me.
Totally blame him. But it's interesting because I've spent so much time over the last couple of days, researching your career and everything you've done, and if you were to just focus on that one album and in particular that one song, that would make for a pretty good story all by itself. But the more I dig, the more I realize that Bat Outta Hell was just a brief blip in your career, and there's actually much more interesting things in your life beyond maybe the biggest song you ever recorded. It's actually a fascinating story of someone who has kind of been a little bit all over the place in a way.
Yeah. Well, thanks, but I never see Paradise as a blip. I see it as a portal to pray, in the music business, to everything that ever happened to me. A lot of people saw what I wrote when Jim died. I said, stop right there. Those 2 words, gave me my career and shook up the world, So, yeah, I see what you're saying, but I could never minimize the effect that song had on my life.
I read something, and you can confirm whether this is true or not. You recorded that song in a single take. Is that right?
Yeah. I mean, what did I know? I had never sung on a record before. I'm like, oh, you better get this right, man. And
I mean,
and you know, I created a scene. You know, I got Meat to come in and sit in a chair, so I wasn't just singing to my imagination. I had Meat sit in a chair, and I sang it to him, and that was pretty much that.
I mean, you know, when you put it into that perspective, to have nailed it in one shot, and then have this song, you know, listed in maybe like one of the top 10, top dozen songs of all time. That's amazing to me that you were able to do it. Just because, I mean, there are some singers that'll take 2 or 3 weeks to get a vocal part done correctly.
Right. Well, as I got older and more experienced, I don't think it ever was ever 2 weeks, but I don't. Maybe I did do things in one take, but I mean that was definitely beginner's luck, and somebody whose voice was really young and really ready to do it and supple and had no problem hitting everything.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it's just the way I thought you were supposed to do it. Right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, never having been a part of an album that sold 50 million records, it's hard for me to say for sure. But you know, you talk about that song and that album being kind of like a portal, a gateway to the rest of your career. How did you, going back a few years, you had met Meatloaf and Jim Steinman, if I'm getting this correctly, as part of the touring company of National Lampoon's Lemmings.
No, not Lemmings. There were two Lampoon shows. There was Lemmings first. Lemmings was sort of a takeoff on Woodstock. People did all sorts of impressions. I think that might be where Belushi first did Joe Cocker.
Right.
And but National Lampoon show was just sketches. I don't think they were connected in any way. They were just what they thought was funny, and let's put it up on stage. Yeah, so it was the National Lampoon show.
When you met these guys, and obviously they were probably talking about music, and certainly Jim Steinman, you know, is a hell of a songwriter, and Meatloaf's got an amazing voice. So when you're introduced to these guys and they start talking about, wanting you to help them on a record, were you aware of the kind of songs that they were putting together, or were you just kind of going in there blind?
No, I was there. I heard, when you do a show like that, you're traveling around in this little blue van, everybody. And Jim would always talk about his lyrics. And it was funny because even when we got back to New York, he would be working on lyrics, and he would call you at 2 a.m. and say, "Oh, what do you think of this?" And who am I going to criticize him? And so I thought, "That's great, Jim. That's great." He goes, "Oh, okay." He needed, he didn't need it, but it was nice for him to have friends who could give him support. But so that's what it was like on the road. He'd be talking about his, the lyrics, and I got a concept of, this thing was, and then, like I said, there was time in every place we would play would have it, because he was the band. Okay, it was just a piano, so there would always be a piano
right.
that was available, and he would be working on the songs, and we would be singing with him. And before, after there was a sound check, or when we were just hanging around. So I heard the songs, and I got the drift of what it was. It was like post Springsteen, but darker and on steroids and more extreme.
Yeah.
Certainly in the lyrics and the delivery of it. And I always say I was just around in the right place in the right time, but I don't remember the exact details of how
right.
Paradise came about. I'm sure he had it in his mind. This was going to happen because this is Steinman's, the definition, the archetypal, idea of the teenage sex, lust and sex. So, I'm not saying he saw me and wrote the song. I think that I was there and I was singing it. Obviously, the the Lampoon Show was a review, and there were songs. There were original songs. I wish I could say who wrote them. Probably the Lampoon guys, guy named Paul Jacobs, people who had worked in it before. So anyway, obviously he heard me sing and brought me into it. I'm sure had me sing along while he was developing it, and Meat and I worked together on it.
My impression of Jim's, I mean, I've interviewed Meatloaf before. I've never had a chance to talk to Jim Steinman, but my impression of these guys is that these are their music, as epic as it was, kind of reflected who the two of them were. In a way, much of their own personality was larger than life. And I get the sense that you would have had to have been at that level too for them to want to, incorporate you into this music. I mean, you certainly had a powerful voice, but to work with guys like this, and then you add a Todd Rundgren on top of that. I mean, there's a lot of personality going on in a studio with those guys.
Right, exactly. Obviously, it was the voice, and I really got Jim's humor. And Meat and I were good friends. And then, of course, when you meet Todd, it's like, okay, take a breath. It's Todd Rundgren. But then, then it just becomes, we were all up there. I mean, the band included Kazim Sultan from Todd's band, Roy Bittan, Max Weinberg. I mean, it was awesome. And we were all staying in up there, and it was in the middle of the winter. So it became kind of a winter camp, and you got to know everybody, and we rehearsed. There was rehearsal period, like it was a show, rather than everybody just going in and playing on the record. So there was a period of time that you got to know everybody, and they heard me, and there was in some cases a respect that was developed. But Todd was incredible. That was amazing. Yeah.
So once the thing was done, and it took a little while for it to for people to put it out and to release it. There had always been
a long time.
It took a real long time, which is strange because based upon just if you were just going to put a needle on a record and listen to it, you say, all right, this is a hell of a record. But then you flip the back cover over, and it shows Meatloaf. And I know there's been a lot of, I mean, I don't want to say stereotypical, or maybe he's like the anti-stereotypical rock star. He's not an individual that you would necessarily say, oh, there's a guy who's got a star quality look in a very superficial business.
Right.
That did hold him back as far as the release of that record.
No. It held. Yeah, I won't say the way he looked held it back. The record, what was held back was getting signed. Originally auditioning for all these record companies who were putting out at the time, the Eagles and Fleetwood Mac and stuff like that. It was the late 70s who just didn't get it and who were a little bit terrified of it, and said to everybody, hey, don't go near this thing with a 10-foot pole. And, because I guess it was, you could say it was the physical persona, because these were very small rooms that we were in, a rehearsal studio in New York called NOLA, N-O-L-A, and a very small, rehearsal space, piano, me, Meatloaf, Steinman, and Rory Dodd, who went on to become like an incredible studio singer, but obviously the predominating image was Meatloaf, 3 feet away from them, and it was huge. So, but it was the music too. They didn't get, it was too much. People who wanted to be safe and keep doing what they were doing until we met Steve Popovich, who eventually signed the group.
And I imagine that all it takes is the first few million copies to be sold, even if it takes a long time to get there, had to be a little bit validating for everybody. Say, gee, I don't know what you were waiting for, because this thing is on its way to selling 50 million copies.
Yeah, there had to be a lot of record executives who were in trouble after that.
I would think so. When you talked about that album opening doors for you, I know soon after that you went back into acting. I think you went onto to Broadway for a while. And then at some point you decide it's time for your first solo record in 1979.
Right.
And Mick Ronson, who played with David Bowie, and Ian Hunter from Mott the Hoople, wound up producing this for you. How did you meet those guys?
I met him through, again, Steve Popovich. He signed me to Cleveland International, which was his label under the Epic umbrella. And he signed me, because of the Meatloaf thing. And we worked together for a while, making some demos. And he signed Ian. So, it was Popovich, had kind of a stable of people who were working together, and also Ian and I shared musicians, and I had his musicians on the road. But yeah, it was all him. He was an incredible music man. He wasn't just a suit. He was never a suit. I'll tell you that much, because he did not wear suits. And he had such a passion. And, he came in there and fell in love with the Bat Out of Hell material that I told you other record people ran away from. He embraced. And then did he bring in Todd? He must have brought in Todd. I'm trying to think of who came first, because Todd came in with a video camera, and he was filming it, and he was. I remember him just laughing, sort of delighted and amazed by what he was seeing. So between these two guys, it was magical because, they got it.
There's a story, I assume, with you going, back into acting right after recording, your part on that record, and then Meatloaf putting together a promotional video before videos were actually really something. And they wind up using somebody other than you. Carla DeVito winds up lip syncing to your parts. Was there anything to that, or was that just a matter of like a scheduling conflict?
No, it was a matter of which, if I had management or anything, might not have happened. Or, but as Carla and I are very good friends now. She sings on my record, so right. I'm not being negative towards her in any way. It was when they put the tour together. And Carla, sang the part, or was the girl on the tour. And they had this concept that, well, she's the one that everybody was going to be seeing on the road, and they wanted people to relate, correlate, and like that. So I didn't end up on the video, but like I said, had my own record, was on TV, was on Broadway. I mean, that period of time for me was kind of amazing because of the many, many things I got to do in the many genres, as it were.
I would imagine your day planner in 1978, 79 must have looked like an absolute mess.
Yeah, well, I was young enough that I probably didn't need a day planner. Now I need to see it online. I need to write it down. Mm-hmm. I need Randy, my publicist, to remind me 15 times. So, but back then, I think my brain didn't have wasn't like Swiss cheese quite as much as it is right now.
Because as the 1980s is approaching, and you're doing more session work, and you're singing with Ian Hunter, you're doing music with Blue Oyster Cult, and then all of a sudden you're singing backups with The Clash, and on 2 albums, Sandinista and Combat Rock. How did you get to meet them? I mean, were you introduced to them somehow? I mean, what was the handshake on that?
No, I was dating Mick, and we had met. I was over there probably in December of whatever, 79. I was over there to perform, and I went like on maybe a Saturday, and maybe I went on a Thursday to go see the place and hear a band, and I met him there, and we started getting together, and it was gosh, I don't know, a year later or so that the recording stuff happened.
I remember hearing about this, but never actually getting a chance to hear the record, and that's the Spirit of St. Louis record that you did with all 4 members of the Clash as your
Mm-hmm.
backing band,
Mm-hmm.
and I thank God that Spotify exists because I was able to hear those songs, and it was a really powerful record. I mean, it was pretty easy to identify the fact the Clash is right behind you, and it didn't sound awkward at all. I mean, your voice was so strong and the songs were good enough. You're like that it winds up. I think it winds up being a really great record.
Yeah, I mean, and I think that this record, Fighting Words, is going to get a lot of attention, and hopefully it'll make people to look back into the catalog a bit, and like all the punks back then, the kids who are now middle-aged people who are like, oh, what the fuck, hey, hold on, this, will probably might go back and hear it, the Clash fans and my fans. So it might have a bit of a life in terms of people paying attention to it. It was certainly different and incredibly unique.
It was, and I think as far as an historical document, I think it's actually you're really interesting because it's not like those guys lent themselves to other people's music all that often, especially back then. Obviously, you have a personal relationship with Mick and with the band, but they didn't really make themselves available outside of a small circle of people.
Yeah, well, I know Mick produced other people. He produced Ian at one point. He
Hmm.
produced. There was a girl band in New York. I forget their name. They were really good. And when they had such a far flung group of influences, like a lot of reggae people like that. I'm sure. He after I knew them, he went into producing. But yeah, it was pretty unusual that they did a whole album with somebody like that.
One album that I know you worked on and it's an album that I love was from 1984 with Joe Jackson and Body and Soul. It's another really big sounding record with a million people in the band.
Yeah. Well, I remember it was really fast, and I thought I got fired from it, to tell you the truth. But people tell me that I'm on the record, so okay.
Why did you think you get fired?
I did. I think I did some stuff, and they were like, I don't think so. And they brought in this woman named Elaine Caswell. So, but it was I can tell you, I don't have any. It's not much I can tell you.
You then go back into acting again, and then all of a sudden, like these big films are coming your way: King of Comedy and Tootsie and Fatal Attraction, and Married to the Mob, and all of a sudden you're kind of you're kind of stepping back from music a little bit, focusing on acting. How did the Night Court job present itself? How did that happen?
Well, I guess after my third album, I decided, that the record business was not happening for me, and I didn't feel I had support. So, I went back and I said, "Oh, let me just be somebody's employee." So I guess had an agent, started to get sent out for things, and I mean, I had done television in that I did that show Three Girls Three, but
Hmm.
I sang on it, so that was the big hook with me on that. But I auditioned, and I have a certain quirkiness that sometimes attracts people, and I think that's what they like. So that was one season, but the film stuff was great. It kind of came one after the other. It was really a cool time,
Yeah.
And then before any of that, the Hair movie, which was one of my best experiences ever, singing the song Black Boys. We're in Central Park. Milos Forman, the choreography of Twyla Tharp. I mean, that was one of my funnest, to use a non-English word, day. It was. Remember, it was in the fall. It was yeah. So that, and then all these other movies. I mean, I would say I have small parts in big movies, which is kind of great.
But you're also working with notable people on these films. I mean,
Absolutely.
everybody from Dustin Hoffman to Tom Cruise to the King of Comedy guy Robert
Michelle
De Niro.
Pfeiffer,
Yeah, I
yeah,
mean, just
and the
amazing.
directors. I mean,
Yeah,
that I was able to get work with these powerhouses. I mean, yeah, I loved Milos, but my favorite of all time was Jonathan Demme, because he was such a rock and roll guy, and his set was so cool and fun. I mean, I don't know if you've seen Married to the Mob recently, but just to be able to do that, somebody giving you the opportunity to be so out there, which we were, I mean, the hair and the costumes kind of did a lot for us, but to be able to play those characters, that was very great.
You talked about always spending one season on Night Court, and obviously it's a show that was on for 9 seasons, and Marky Post winds up replacing you on that show. I assume you saw the news this week that she had just died. That's
did.
Very sad.
Yeah.
Did you? I mean,
certainly is.
My understanding is that the producers of that show wanted her in that role to begin with, but she had a contractual obligation to the fall guy. Were you ever told that this was going to that was the case, that they wanted her first, or?
No. Here's another case where I get fired. I remember I did the season, and I was kind of like, yeah, I'm a little bit of fish out of water. I don't know, wearing the lawyer suits and that, having to try to do this material. And I went back to New York, and I put together a cabaret act, and it was really successful. And my agent came to the show, and I was talking to a bunch of people. I was running around. I was having a great time. I finally went to talk to her, and she said, you've been fired from Night Court. I'm like, what? Holy crap. But, of course I was sad and felt rejected, but then it was a relief because I got back to doing the stuff I did, which is, I went out to San Diego and originated the part of the witch in Stephen Sondheim's Into the Woods, which is like up there with my top 3 accomplishments, I think.
Wow.
It was unbelievable. Then I went back and did it on Broadway, and I did another show in between. And that takes me up to 89 when I met my husband and got married and had a kid.
And you've been together for 24 years. So that's or
24 years.
Is it
31.
31. My math skills are terrible. But
do your math, friend.
Well, you know how it is. Once you get to a certain age, math just doesn't mean that much anymore.
Hey, I was always bad at math, and now, I mean, if I try to add 2 numbers together, it doesn't happen. So I'm not going to blame you because I can certainly sympathize.
No, believe me, I'm the same way. I'm counting on fingers and toes half the time anyway. So
yeah,
but nevertheless, it's a long time to be married and in show business, and and I know he's done things too, and marriage is hard by itself, but you add a lot of other things where your time may be more valuable than maybe more traditional relationships. It must make things a little bit strained, or at some point. Or does he just like seeing you get out of the house?
Well, it was a little. I mean, for years I didn't do anything, and then when I went to do this show where I met Paul Foglino, who writes all my material, in 2008. Then we recorded an album. Then I did some touring, but our kids were older, and now my husband is a little nuts. We have 2 dogs, and we have sort of a young dog, and he's always like, "You can't leave because of the dogs," and But anyway, I'm working that out because I'm starting to do gigs around this record. Things I want to do. So this period of time right now is going to be, to me, the most important career time that I have had in a long time.
I do want to talk about the record. Fighting.
I hope so. That's why we're here.
Absolutely, Fighting Words. It's your first record in a good long time. And like you said, you've been busy living your life and doing other things. What made now the time to start working on a new record?
Paul and I did a record in 2013 called About Time. And we put that out and we played around New York and we did some stuff. But, I didn't have sort of the support I do now, with my publicist who's getting me out there like crazy. And then I hooked up. Not hooked up. That's the word kids use. It's not right. I got, what's the word? Involved with a guy in Belgium named Luc Standert. In actually 2009, he did a thing called Song City. And this is when there was MySpace. And this guy writes me out of the blue, and for some reason, I thought it was okay. I got a good feeling, so I flew over there and did this thing. I had never met him, but Garland Jeffries and Elliot Murphy had anyway. So I met him, and then after this about Time Record, he started booking me in Holland and Belgium, and I went over there from 2015 for about 4 years, on and off doing shows, and it was great. He put together a fantastic band. I mean, these musicians over there, they're like studio people.
Mm-hmm.
So did a bunch of gigs. So I wasn't concentrating on doing another record because I didn't know if that had been the right move. And in the meantime, Paul was writing these songs, and he kind of had to twist my arm to sit down and pay attention. I mean, it was years, 5 years or something. I'm up in my house in the country now where I've been basically for 15 months, but he would come up here. We would work on demos. We would do stuff in the city, just he and I. And, finally got this group of songs that, he was persistent, and he's got a engineering degree from Columbia, so he's got a very organized mind. He made tracks, sent it out to all the musicians. It wasn't a band in a room. It was kind of like people do things now, but we did it a few years back and made these tracks, and he brought it to my house, and I did the vocals. And it just, it had to look at it and say, is this something that's going to something we want to release and put out there? And luckily we did, because everybody thinks it's a fantastic record.
It's a great record. There's a couple of things about it that I think are very cool. Like you said before, you're singing a duet with Carla DeVito, which I think is very, very cool, considering what people may perceive as I don't like,
of course,
a tense relationship. But I think that's wonderful that one, you are friends, and then two, you're collaborating together on music. I think that's wonderful.
Yeah, me too. I feel great about it. I feel great about her. She's a wonderful person.
The other thing that's on the record that's I don't really know if it's a surprise, but you sing a Jim Steinman song that was on Bat Out of Hell, Heaven Can Wait, which was not. You were not on that track back then, right?
No, but I had sung it before the Bat Out of Hell record came out in a musical and a show that Jim did. We did it at the Kennedy Center in D.C. It was called Neverland, which Jim has, been writing about Neverland. He did it. He did a version of it in college. He loved that the story of the Lost Boys, and it was Neverland, and I played Wendy, sort of the mother goddess virgin character, and sang Heaven Can Wait in that show. And I've always sung it ever since, whenever I had a band or, did an act or anywhere that I have ever sung. I have sung that song.
It's a great version of it. I mean, it's a really beautiful, performance of that song. Really nice job.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And so the other song is "I'm Just Happy to Be Here." It's just it sounds like almost an autobiographical song from you.
Yeah, well, that's kind of what Paul did. It was a little out of his regular wheelhouse, because he's got sort of a cynical but not cynical view of things sometimes, and funny and sarcastic. But this is really a sincere telling of two people looking back on their lives and being really happy to be here where they are right now in their lives, and discussing it with each other.
I think the thing that's wonderful and to me most obvious here is that your voice just sounds like it just stepped out of 1977, 78, and it doesn't sound like it doesn't sound like it's aged very much. Maybe there's a little tweaking here and there to help you out, but I mean, I think it sounds.
There's not a lot of tweaking. Not a lot of tweaking.
No,
we didn't have a super high tech situation. I mean, maybe in the mix. I mean, yeah, no, I always like reverb.
Yeah.
You know, some echo and reverb always helps you along. So I always have that.
I think
But I do my best to keep my voice in good shape, and I think my voice does sound pretty young when I hear it.
It does. I mean,
which I'm really happy about.
I think, sometimes when you hear a voice that's being, manipulated electronically, you can kind of hear it, you can kind of see it. But I try.
Yeah, you can see through it.
Yeah, and I tried to listen for it on the new record. And I'm like, no, I think that's probably how she's still sounding, which is pretty remarkable considering, the length of your careers. A lot of people,
and the length of my life. Let's be honest.
I'm not going to sit here and call
no,
you. Oh,
I'm saying
and age you. I don't want to do that to you, Ellen.
I'm saying. Thank you.
Well, if you're saying it, then I'm okay, and I'll leave it
okay.
at that.
Okay.
Ellen, it really is a very, very good record. I'm thrilled to have the chance to talk to you about it, and no hard feelings about being there when I was heartbroken by my first girlfriend. I won't hold that against you at all.
If there's anything I can do, if you have her email, if you have her on Facebook or anything, I can confront her and tell her, the big mistakes she made. And but I'm sure she knows that. I'm sure she's been kicking herself all these years.
Oh,
so
I'm sure
we can feel good about that.
Oh, I'm sure she's just loaded with a lifetime of regret.
Of regret.
Ellen, it's a real pleasure to talk to you. Best of luck with the record. I do appreciate the time today.
My pleasure. Take care.
You too. The name of Ellen Foley's new album is called Fighting Words, and it is now available just about everywhere. If you like the show, please feel free to share it, review it, tell all your friends. You can email me at bax@rock102.com. I'd love to know what you think, and thanks for listening to Baxy's Musical Podcast.